Hi, everyone. I met a friend from my youth this week whom I hadn't seen in a long time. We spent about 15 minutes just rehashing the different guys in the gang. That is to say, the guys our age that we grew up with and where we were all in life now. It got me thinking about that old neighborhood and some of the different colorful characters who made it what it was. Rudy and Hachman were the human equivalents of Waldorf and Sadler, old men who set up the shalashudas and Sunday morning breakfast each week, who would argue in the kitchen like two opposing commentators on Fox News, but trusted and respected each other outside of it. Coach, who we knew as Saba W., was the John Madden of the Yeshiva Basketball League, a legendary man who challenged anyone about the league rules by explaining, "Rules? I wrote the rules." He continued to offer advice on Yeshiva League sports and a whole host of topics, solicited or unsolicited, from the back row of the Hashkama Minyan that I regularly frequented to at least two additional generations of admirers. And then there was Dr. B. Now, Dr. B was a renowned doctor, chief of his department, I believe, in anesthesia, who loved to share his insights on Torah, on life, and on his history with me each time I saw him on Shabbos. One particular Shabbos morning, Dr. V found out that I was studying psychology. He asked me if I was doing research. I tried to explain what I was doing briefly, and, as if his question was actually supposed to be rhetorical, he proceeded to tell me about his brush with psychological research when he was in medical school. I was in a room with three other volunteers, he told me. One introduced himself as a chief resident, another was a more advanced medical student, and the third was a professor in the medical school somehow. He told me that their group was shown a group of lines and was asked to individually choose which of the lines was the longest. He recalled the study because, as he said, it seemed the longer the test session went, the worse everyone else did. They kept picking shorter lines. I could barely contain myself. You see, it seems that Dr. B was the subject in some offshoot of Solomon Ash's 1951 line social conformity experiment, where the goal was actually not to see who can tell what line was longest, but rather was to see if the people would conform to a social pressure from a majority group, even when they knew that their answer was wrong. Somehow, I told Dr. B, the people you were in with were actually likely actors with a script and a part to play to see if you would conform to them because of the social pressure in your environment. We talk about social pressures in our environment all the time. We're acutely aware of the social pressures that affect our kids and the choices they make for themselves as to how they behave and how they talk and how they choose to lead. And certainly a desire to fit in or conform socially is a big part of their decisions. And to a different extent, we could also be aware of the effect of social norms on the way we speak, behave, react, or even consider the news from our environment ourselves. There's no question about it. No matter how hard we think we're separated from the world around us, we're definitely attuned to it and affected by it. Even Grok, artificial intelligence's answer to so many of society's challenges, including business and healthcare, has also been known to dangerously spew vile language and conspiracy theories as fact, and inappropriate images and information based on its information gathering from those who are involved with its input. The influence was so strong lately that governments around the world have stepped in, and the demand for better regulations and a stronger security gate for its responses has been called for even here in many states in the United States. Now, lest we think that this is a new problem, Moshe Rabbeinu too notes in the difficulties of the environment in this week's parsha. You see, at the end of the parsha, during the Makkah of Barad, the plague of hail, Moshe is called to Paro, and the king begs him to put an end to the Makkah, to the plague. And Moshe agrees, but with a strange prerequisite. Moshe declares, "Kitseisi eso'ir ephrosis kapai el Hashem." When I leave the city, I'll spread my hands to Hashem. Why does Moshe need to leave the city first? Rashi notes, "Aval besoch ha'ir lo hispalel if shaisa malea gilulim." Within the city he did not pray, because it was full of idols. Moshe Rabbeinu, perhaps the most appropriately ascetic human on the planet, was not comfortable praying in a city filled with idols due to the influence they might have on him. And for his prayer to have effect, he would need to leave the city. This has been a recurring challenge for all people, including our Jewish nation. David HaMelech comments, "Vayisarvu bagoyim vayilamdu ma'asehem," that when the Jews mixed in with other nations, they learned from their actions. None of us, it seems, is free from social conformity. The Rambam explains why. Derech briyaso shel adon lios nimshach b'deosav u'b'ma'asav achareyav ve'achaverav. The way man was created, he's influenced by his friends and countrymen. He's influenced both in action and in thought. Thus, the Rambam recommends that the man choose an environment for himself and his family that's a positive influence upon him. That way, he'll be able to be influenced in a positive manner and adopt it for himself. And so Moshe went out of the city in order to properly pray. And where possible, you and I seek sanctuary to distinguish ourselves from our environment. But what's one supposed to do when he or she goes outside to face environmental influences that are too strong? How can we ensure ourselves and our families while remaining active citizens in a community that we're a part of? The answer is in the chicken coop and the monkey house. You see, the late great Rav Shimshon David Pincus explains that when you see chickens in a chicken coop, they act a certain way. They strut, they buck, they peck, and they cackle. Yet the farmer who feeds them each day and day in and day out for multiple times a day doesn't learn to strut or cackle like a chicken. Why not? Similarly, in the zoo, monkeys act a certain way. They climb, they swing, they make faces, and they behave well like a bunch of monkeys, totally bananas. But the zookeeper who maintains their abode doesn't go ape. Why? Rav Pincus explains that social influence happens when someone has a connection to the environment. And when we're connected to a society, we can be influenced by the society. When we think we're interested in the common goal of the society's success, then it's quite possible and even likely that the individual will set aside his or her own beliefs for the sake of conforming to the environment, ensuring its and his success. However, this belief is susceptible to corruption. You see, when society is led down a road that is wrong or dangerous, conforming to it often leads one to give up his or her honest beliefs and values, and often to minimize those values for the sake of the society, ultimately forgetting them. Only when we recall that we may be living in a place, but we are different than the values of that place, only then will we be able to withstand the conformity principle. When we engage in society but demonstrate our difference in our dress, in our language, and our commitment to higher Torah values, only then can we make ourselves aware of our responsibility to a society while remaining separate and not enmeshed in it. And that's how we can be responsible citizens for the society without sacrificing ourselves in the process. Just like the zookeeper and the farmer, we can be distinguished and not be chicken. Which brings me back to my dear Dr. B. I asked him how he responded to that illustrious group of more experienced medical professionals during his line tests. He told me he didn't care. He told the investigators exactly what he thought. He ignored the others. I asked him how was he able to withstand the collective pressure of the others in the room. And he pointed to the top of his head where his yarmulke was perched proudly. See this, he said to me? I've always been different. I stood out in the neighborhood growing up, in the college, and even in medical school. If I was able to know that and be reminded of my differences in places where the cost for nonconformity was greater, I wasn't going to be swayed by a few lines. Jews in Mitzrayim, Jews in New York, Jews in California, or anywhere in the greater global society need to remember that no matter how on top of the host society we think we are, we do much better when we pay attention to how the lines are truly drawn. Wishing you and yours a Shabbat Shalom and a Shabbat Shalom to all.